Focus. Here's a strange statistic. Men make up 49% of the population, but nearly 80% of all suicides. A paradox hiding in plain sight, half the world carrying almost all the silent exits. Why? Why do men who look strong on the outside collapse in the shadows? Why does a culture that praises male toughness produce so many broken inner worlds? Beneath the silence, there's a map. A blueprint of how boys are shaped, hardened, and sometimes shattered. And if we're willing to look deeper, these 10 books reveal the truths men were never allowed to speak. You're watching Fruity Wisdom, where deep ideas turn into sharp, life-changing insights. Subscribe and stay curious. To understand the modern man, we begin where all journeys start, in the brain itself. Number 1. The Male Brain by Luann Brizendine. Neurobiology, the hidden hardware beneath the surface. Brizendine reveals a truth we rarely acknowledge. Men aren't emotionless, they're engineered differently. Not colder, not weaker, just wired for another kind of survival. She starts with the testosterone tsunami of puberty, the hormonal force that shapes instinct, competition, drive, and desire. It doesn't just sculpt the body, it sculpts behavior. But here's the twist: men do feel deeply. So why do they often look silent? Why does it seem like nothing is happening inside? Because their emotional pathways move differently. Feeling goes straight to action, straight to doing, straight to fixing, rarely passing through the verbal centers that turn emotion into language. It's not that men don't care. Their caring just moves faster than their words. This is what Brizendine calls the fix-it instinct. When someone they love is hurting, men don't pause, they act. Not to dismiss the pain, but to dismantle it. To solve it so their partner can breathe again, and so they can, too. Here's the biological key. When someone close to him cries, a man's cortisol spikes. Stress rises. His body screams for resolution. Listening without fixing feels like standing still in a burning room. So he reaches for the plan, the tool, the solution. Action becomes his way of calming chaos, hers and his. Brizendine's message is seismic. Men aren't silent because they lack emotion. They're silent because emotion becomes movement instead of words. Because their hearts speak through behavior. Because biology whispers, fix what hurts so the people you love can feel safe. Understand this, and you unlock the first doorway into the male psyche. Number 2. King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. A map of masculine energy. Ancient, archetypal, and alive in every man. Moore and Gillette argue that men aren't just personalities, they're patterns shaped by myth, instinct, and the stories humanity can't stop retelling. They say a mature man is 4 things at once: the king, the warrior, the magician, the lover. 4 pillars that, when balanced, create a man who is grounded, purposeful, and whole. But here's the danger. When these energies lose balance, they don't vanish, they distort. The king becomes the tyrant or the weakling. The warrior becomes the sadist or the masochist. The magician becomes the manipulator or the detached observer. The lover becomes the addict or the impotent dreamer. So the real question becomes, what happens when a man's strengths start sabotaging him? Where does he go when the light inside him throws a darker shadow? Moore and Gillette's answer: shadow isn't evil, it's power without direction. Fire without a hearth, energy without purpose. And many men today live exactly there. They suppress aggression instead of guiding it, bury ambition instead of refining it, silence desire instead of understanding it. But buried energy doesn't disappear, it resurfaces as rage, addiction, passivity, or emptiness. That is the shadow self. The authors offer a radical truth: men don't mature by becoming nice. They mature by integrating their power with purpose, their strength with sensitivity, their intellect with intuition. The archetypes are not cages, they're compasses. They help men ask, where is my king, the part that blesses instead of belittles? Where is my warrior, the discipline and duty? Where is my magician, the insight and strategy? Where is my lover, the empathy and emotional aliveness? Because if even one is missing, so is the man he could become. The deeper message? The mature masculine isn't dominance, it's alignment. Not bravado, balance. Not control, consciousness. This book gives men a mythic mirror to see their wounds, their power, and their potential. Understanding these archetypes isn't just psychology, it's initiation, the shift from boyhood to manhood. Number 3. Iron John by Robert Bly. A myth, a metaphor, a mirror for modern manhood. Bly opens with the fairy tale of Iron John, the wild man pulled from the forest, raw and mysterious. Why myth? Because myths aren't old, they're eternal. They say what ordinary language can't. They reveal truths men no longer hear in the noise of modern life. Bly argues that men today aren't suffering from too much masculinity, but from watered-down, disconnected, domesticated masculinity, men polished into politeness, yet starving inside. He calls this the crisis of lost initiation. For centuries, boys became men through rituals, mentors, and moments that said, "You carry responsibility now." But today, where is that moment? Where is that mentor? Without initiation, Bly says boys stay boys, even inside adult bodies. They chase power without purpose, freedom without direction, pleasure without presence. This is where the wound appears, often inherited from fathers, or shaped by their absence. Not just emotional, but existential. A fracture in identity. A question no elder ever answers. What becomes of a boy whose father never showed him how to be a man? His fire doesn't disappear, it goes underground. It turns into hidden heat, shame, anger, confusion. He feels the flame but fears it. He senses his wildness but suppresses it. Iron John symbolizes that wildness, not violence, but vitality. Not brutality, but boldness. The earthy, unapologetic masculine energy buried under years of pleasing and performing. Bly's message cuts deep. Men don't mature by hardening, they mature by descending into themselves. Into the forest. Into the wound. Initiation is about becoming true, not just tough. And men need other men for this journey, mentors, brothers, elders. A man cannot initiate himself, he must be witnessed, challenged, and guided. That's why Iron John ignited a movement. It named what no one wanted to say: men are lonely. Men are longing. Men are lost. Not because they are weak, but because the old rituals that shaped them have vanished. Iron John isn't a fairy tale. It's a formula, a callback to the forest, to the roots, to the wild part within every man. Not to fear it, but to finally father it. Number 4, I Don't Want to Talk About It, by Terrence Real. A book about silence, not peaceful silence, but the kind that sinks and suffocates. The kind men mistake for strength, until it destroys them. Terrence Real makes a radical claim: men do get depressed. They just don't look depressed. They don't fold inward, they erupt outward. So he asks, what if the angriest man in the room is actually the saddest? What if the workaholic isn't driven but drowning? What if the quiet man isn't calm but numb? Men rarely cry their pain, they act it. Sadness becomes sarcasm. Hurt becomes hustle. Emptiness becomes escapism. Anger turns into armor. Work becomes a wall. Alcohol becomes anesthesia. Real calls this covert depression, misery hidden, suffering disguised. A storm with no thunder, no warning, until the damage is done. At the center is alexithymia, the inability to put feelings into words. Not because men lack emotion, but because they were trained out of their emotions before they ever understood them. How does a boy learn to feel when every feeling he shows is shamed? How does a man speak when he never learned the language of emotion? How does he ask for help when his identity is built on not needing it? It's like giving him a violin and breaking his fingers. The instrument exists, but the ability is gone. Real exposes a brutal contradiction. We expect men to be strong, but deny them support. We want them open, but mock their vulnerability. We tell them to man up, then wonder why they shut down. So men learn one equation: pain equals weakness. Weakness equals shame. Shame equals silence. Silence that mutates into depression, addiction, infidelity, rage. Men don't fear feelings, they fear rejection. They fear ridicule. They fear that cracking the armor will unleash everything at once. Real's breakthrough is simple and seismic. The cure for covert depression is not toughness, but truth. Not withdrawal, but connection. Not silence, but speech. A man begins to heal the moment he names what he's been taught to hide. He grows when he grieves what he never received. He becomes whole when he realizes vulnerability isn't the opposite of masculinity, it's the completion of it. Terrence Real gives men a mirror, a vocabulary, and a lifeline. Because sometimes the bravest words a man can speak are the ones he's been forbidden to say. I am hurting, and I need help. Number 5. Raising Cain by Dan Kinlan and Michael Thompson. A book about boys, not the loud ones, but the lonely ones. The boys behind the bravado. The boys behind I'm fine. The boys who learn early that the world doesn't want their tears or their truth. Kinlan and Thompson reveal a striking contradiction. Boys are born more emotionally reactive than girls, more sensitive, expressive, and open. So what crushes that natural clarity? What turns a compassionate boy into a closed-off man? Their answer, the emotional miseducation. A quiet curriculum that teaches boys to disconnect from themselves. From playgrounds to classrooms, boys absorb a culture of cruelty. Don't cry. Don't be a sissy. Don't talk about your feelings. 3 sentences that cut a boy's emotional vocabulary in half. Emotional amputation disguised as maturity. We assume boys are naturally tough. But what if their resilience is really repression? What if silence isn't strength, but surrender? Boys learn quickly. Emotion is risky. Vulnerability is punished. Softness is shameful. So they build masks: sarcasm, swagger, humor, hardness. And slowly, the mask becomes the man. The performance becomes the personality. These boys grow into men who crave connection but can't articulate it. Men fluent in anger but illiterate in sadness. Men who push away the love they want because connection requires a language they were never taught. Kinlan and Thompson's metaphors strike hard. A boy's heart becomes a locked room, not because he locked it, but because someone hid the key. His empathy is a muscle, strong at birth, weakened by adolescence. His sadness is a shadow, present but ignored. The consequences echo into adulthood: failed relationships, explosive tempers, loneliness disguised as pride. So the book asks the real questions. What if boys aren't misbehaving, they're misunderstood? What if they aren't cold, just emotionally crowded? What if the problem isn't the boy, but the box we force him into? The solution isn't softness, it's skill. Teaching boys emotional language. Teaching them courage in vulnerability. Teaching them that tears don't threaten masculinity, they restore humanity. Because the truth is seismic. When boys learn to feel, men learn to love. When boys learn to name emotion, men learn to express it. When boys learn empathy, men learn intimacy. Raising Cain isn't just a book. It's a warning, a blueprint, and a plea to let boys grow into men, without losing the best parts of themselves. Number 6. The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. A book built on an uncomfortable truth. Patriarchy doesn't just wound women, it wounds men first, and it wounds them silently. Bell Hooks enters the heart of masculinity not to condemn men, but to free them. She asks, if men are taught to be strong, why do so many feel so broken? Her answer is devastating. From boyhood, men are trained to mutilate their own emotional selves. Hooks calls this psychic self-mutilation, the slow killing of a boy's softness, not with violence, but with shame. Don't cry. Don't need anyone. Don't feel too much. 3 commands that become a cage. Boys learn early that power wins approval, and emotion threatens power. So they amputate tenderness, bury vulnerability, and trade authenticity for armor. The cruel paradox? A man is praised for being strong, while punished for being human. How do you love someone taught never to love back? How do you reach a heart wrapped in armor? How do you heal a wound he's trained to deny? Hooks argues men aren't cold, they're conditioned. Men aren't unloving, they've been unloved in the language they needed. Men aren't empty, they're exiled from their emotional selves. She exposes masculinity's central contradiction. Men long for connection yet fear it. Crave vulnerability yet avoid it. Want closeness yet sabotage it. Patriarchy gives men privilege, but also pain without permission, desire without guidance, strength without softness. Her metaphors cut sharply. A man's heart is a boarded-up house. not because he fears the light, but because he was taught the world outside is dangerous. A boy's emotional life is a neglected garden, not broken, just never tended. Then she asks, what is power worth if it costs a man the ability to love? What is dominance worth if it destroys connection? What is strength worth if it isolates him from himself? But Hooks doesn't stop at diagnosis. She offers a path. She calls men back to what they abandoned. The vulnerable boy they buried. The honesty they lost. The compassion they were punished for showing. She insists men are capable of deep, radical love, not despite masculinity, but because of it, once masculinity is freed from fear. The will to change isn't about fixing men, it's about freeing them. From silence, from shame, from a definition of masculinity too small for the size of their souls. Number 7. No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover. A book about the man who smiles too much, who apologizes too fast, who sacrifices so quietly he disappears. A man who wants peace so badly, he creates a war inside himself. Glover introduces the nice guy, not a truly kind man, but a compulsively compliant one. Not generous, but calculating. Not selfless, but self-erasing. He asks the question nice guys never face. Why do men who try so hard to be good feel so bad? Because beneath the politeness is fear. The nice guy isn't nice by choice, he's nice because he's terrified not to be. Afraid of conflict, afraid of rejection, afraid he's not enough. So he hides his needs, desires, anger, ambition, authenticity. He becomes a man of masks, agreeable on the outside, anxious on the inside. Glover exposes the psychological engine beneath it, the covert contract, I will meet your needs without you asking, and you will magically meet mine without me asking. But the world doesn't honor contracts it never signed. So the nice guy waits for appreciation, intimacy, reciprocity, none of which arrive. And what happens to a man who gives everything and gets nothing? Resentment rises, bitterness builds. Passive aggression leaks out. The man who was too nice becomes quietly furious, at others, at life, at himself. Glover traces the syndrome back to boyhood, the boy who learned being himself was unsafe. That love was conditional. That pleasing others protected him from punishment. He becomes a man who tries to earn worth through service, who believes love must be bought with perfection, who thinks, if I don't make waves, I won't be abandoned. But the opposite is true. Avoiding conflict kills connection. It destroys attraction. It erodes respect, especially his own. Glover's cure isn't cruelty, it's courage. Courage to set boundaries. Courage to speak desires. Courage to say no without guilt, and yes without fear. He teaches men to trade people-pleasing for presence, approval-seeking for assertiveness, submission for self-respect. Because real masculinity isn't passive or performative, it's principled. It's a man who can stand firm without being harsh, love without losing himself, and choose honesty over harmony when harmony requires self-betrayal. No More Mr. Nice Guy is the moment a man stops negotiating his existence and finally owns it. Number 8, Of Boys and Men by Richard V. Reeves. A book that doesn't whisper, it sounds an alarm. Reeves isn't describing a crisis of character, but a crisis of structure, a societal shift so massive we barely noticed it. He begins with the question everyone avoids: what happens when the world changes faster than the script men were raised to follow? For centuries, the masculine role was fixed: provider, protector, pillar. But when the economy transforms, education evolves, and culture rewrites expectations, what happens when the provider role fades, and nothing replaces it? Reeves calls this the purpose void, a psychological vacuum swallowing men who no longer know where they fit or what they're for. He lays out the data starkly. Boys falling behind in school from the earliest grades. Men leaving the workforce in unprecedented numbers. Loneliness rising. Identity fracturing. Purpose evaporating. Men aren't failing, the world flipped, and no one taught them how to land. Reeves shows how education rewards traits that skew female, organization, patience, verbal fluency, while punishing the movement, competitiveness, and kinetic learning boys naturally bring. The boy who struggles in school becomes the man who doubts himself. Doubt becomes distance. Distance becomes despair. Then Reeves zooms out. The labor market favors knowledge over muscle. The dating market rewards emotional skills men were never taught. Family structures give mothers clear path while men float in ambiguity. So he asks, what does masculinity become when the world no longer needs men in the old ways? How do you build confidence without competence? Identity without instruction? Reeves argues men don't need privilege, they need purpose. Not power over others, but direction for themselves. He offers bold solutions. Teach boys the emotional skills they've been denied. Build mentorship pipelines for struggling young men. Design classrooms that match male learning styles. Delay boys' school entry to match development. Rebuild vocational paths that offer mastery and meaning. Because the crisis isn't that men are obsolete. It's that men are adrift. Lost in a world that changed the rules without changing the roadmap. Lost in a culture that critiques masculinity but rarely guides it. Lost in a society where boys grow older without growing up. Reeves' warning is clear. If we fail boys now, we inherit broken families and broken futures. But if we rebuild male purpose with competence, clarity, and connection, we don't just help men. We strengthen society. Of Boys and Men isn't just research, it's a rescue mission. Number 9. Guyland, by Michael Kimmel. A book about the in-between years, not boyhood, not manhood, but the dangerous drift in the middle. Kimmel calls this place Guyland, a territory with no mentors, no map, but 1,000 unspoken rules. He opens with a sharp question: what if the real pressure on young men doesn't come from women, but from other men? In Guyland, masculinity isn't performed for romance, it's performed for recognition. Not for affection, but for approval. Not for intimacy, but for initiation. The paradox is brutal. Young men feel free, yet trapped. Independent, yet controlled. Surrounded by friends, yet suffocated by expectations. Guyland becomes a culture where risk is a rite of passage. Drink more, care less, feel nothing, prove everything. And Kimmel asks, if this is how boys become men, what kind of men are we producing? At the heart of Guyland is the Guy Code: don't be a wuss. Don't be weird. Don't show weakness. Don't snitch. Don't feel. These aren't rules, they're restraints. A social straitjacket forcing boys into one shape even when their souls don't fit. Kimmel shows how Guyland becomes a holding pattern. A delayed adulthood where responsibility is postponed, intimacy avoided, identity suspended. Emotional adolescence disguised as independence. The rituals, binge drinking, bravado, loyalty tests, aren't just habits. They're hazing ceremonies for a masculinity that never fully forms. He exposes the contrasts: laughter masking loneliness, recklessness masking emptiness, traditions built on fear, rules created by insecurity. Guyland is a performance, a stage where boys act tough so they won't be targeted. A script written by older men and obeyed by younger ones, passed down like a baton of bravado. Underneath it all lies the silent truth: young men are terrified of exile, terrified of losing brotherhood, terrified that stepping outside the code means stepping outside connection. So the cycle continues. They suppress empathy to fit in, deny vulnerability to survive, mute individuality to protect belonging. Kimmel's insight is cutting. Guyland isn't natural, it's cultural. A pause button disguised as freedom. A playground that becomes a prison. So he asks, what would masculinity look like if young men didn't fear each other? What would adulthood look like if men entered it emotionally, not just legally? What would community look like if brotherhood wasn't built on silence and conformity? His message is clear: to help young men grow, we must help them leave Guyland, not by shaming, but by guiding. Not by mocking the rituals, but by offering real rites of passage. Not by condemning the behavior, but by understanding the fear beneath it. When men learn that masculinity isn't something to prove, but something to become, Guyland dissolves, and true adulthood can finally begin. Number 10. The Boy Crisis by Warren Farrell and John Gray. A book that doesn't just identify a problem, it exposes an epidemic. A global pattern stretching from schools to communities, from bedrooms to prisons. Farrell and Gray begin with a striking insight: wherever boys struggle, the strongest predictor is father absence. Not poverty, not race, not class. Fatherlessness. Why does a father's presence shape a boy so deeply? Because fathers don't just influence boys, they initiate them. They introduce challenge, boundaries, resilience, and rough-and-tumble play. They teach boys to manage strength without harm, power without cruelty, competition without chaos. Farrell calls this the father factor, the invisible scaffolding that supports a boy's emotional, psychological, and even biological development. When that scaffolding disappears, the structure collapses, and so does the boy. The authors present the data bluntly. Fatherless boys are far more likely to drop out, act out, lash out. More likely to internalize anger as depression or externalize it as violence. More likely to self-medicate, self-sabotage, or self-destruct. And the darkest finding? Dad deprivation reaches the cellular level. Boys without fathers have shorter telomeres, meaning fatherlessness accelerates biological aging. This isn't just emotional pain, it is physical decline. So the questions become unavoidable. How can a boy learn self-control if no one modeled it? Discipline if no one enforced it? Manhood if no man guided him? Farrell and Gray use vivid metaphors. A fatherless boy is a ship without a rudder, moving, but directionless. A car with horsepower but no steering wheel, speed without stability. A spark with nowhere safe to burn. They show how mothers and fathers provide different but equally essential forms of love. The mother protects. The father prepares. The mother nurtures. The father navigates. The mother softens the world. The father strengthens the boy for that world. Boys need both. But in a society where fatherhood is undervalued or absent, boys grow emotionally lopsided, full of fire but lacking focus, full of desire but lacking direction, full of potential but lacking purpose. The boy crisis doesn't blame fathers, it explains the cost of losing them. It shows that boys don't just benefit from male role models, they depend on them. Farrell offers solutions as urgent as the diagnosis. Reconnect fathers with sons. Rebuild male mentorship. Reintroduce structure, challenge, accountability. Revive rites of passage that cultivate maturity instead of recklessness. Because when boys have fathers, or strong father figures, they gain the tools to regulate emotion, build empathy, develop discipline, and grow character. When boys lack fathers, society loses men long before the boys ever become them. Farrell's message is unmistakable. We don't have a boy problem, we have a father problem. Solve the father problem, and we save the future. When you weave these 10 books together, you see a quiet truth. Men are not broken. Men are blocked. Blocked by biology misunderstood, by culture misaligned, by wounds unhealed, by roles outdated, and by silence unbroken. Every man is born with a full emotional spectrum, but the world narrows it. Every boy begins open-hearted, but the world hardens him. Every man carries tenderness, but the world teaches him to hide it. And yet, beneath all of it, there is still a pulse, a longing to be whole, a desire to feel without fear, a wish to love without armor. If we can listen to these books, if we can listen to these men, if we can listen to the silence they carry, then maybe we can rewrite the story. A story where men don't have to choose between strength and softness, where vulnerability is not betrayal, where fathers return, brothers mentor, and boys grow without losing themselves. A world where men can finally say, I feel, and no one laughs. You're watching Fruity Wisdom, where ideas stay human, even in the noise. Subscribe, and stay curious.